Hello and welcome to the CX Files for May 11th, 2023. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan in Montreal. Mark, great to see you. Spring has definitely sprung here in Canada. How is it down in Brazil?
It's still like high 20s, so 28, 29 degrees and sunny. So even though we're heading into autumn and winter's coming soon, probably in about June, but yeah, it's still not bad.
I think it's pretty sad the fact that you heading into autumn have temperatures higher than us heading into spring here in Canada.
Well, we're both going to Scotland soon. I'm heading off in about a week or so, and yeah, I think that if I looked at the Glasgow summer temperature, it's probably lower than the winter temperature here anyway.
Well, we'll all be making sure that we're wearing our woolies when we're over in Scotland for CX Outsources. It promises to be a great event. We've got, at this point, a near sellout crowd, and we're really anticipating there's going to be some amazing discussions and debate that go on in Glasgow. As the listeners know, we're going to be holding this at Merchants House, which is one of the most remarkable venues I think you could find anywhere in the United Kingdom. So it'll be great to see you there, Mark. It's been, I think, a substantial amount of time. The last time we ran into each other was at the Simon Danchuk book launch in February of last year.
I did see you once between since then, but it was very short.
Of course.
Remember,
at Euston Station.
In London, we managed to kind of cross over for about an hour at Euston Station. But yeah, it was very short. It was like drink a pint and then you're gone.
That's right. That's right. Now you're here, now you're not. But we've got a really interesting podcast this week. Now, this is one that I'd had sort of in the hopper boiling for a while. It was brought to my attention by my friend Marianne Withers, who is the CEO of the Verity Center, which is a boutique BPO operator in the Portsmouth area, that there's an issue when it comes to vulnerability and dealing with vulnerable customers. Now, this has become an absolutely catastrophic situation in the UK market. You follow the news cycle in the UK, as do I, and the extent to which a whole series of different reasons that people have become financially vulnerable has really taken off over the course of the past 10, 15 years. So Marianne and myself were joined by Cath Wohlers, who is with the England illegal money lending team, effectively a watchdog to make sure that organizations or individuals are loaning money in a compliant fashion. We had a chat this was one of the longer interviews I did, where we examined how vulnerability comes about, how contact centers can either help mitigate or can, in some cases, exacerbate vulnerability in vulnerable people. We talk a little bit about different sectors that are more prone to doing this. We talk a little bit about the increase in loan sharking, which is very, very worrying from the standpoint of people trying to make ends meet. And we finish off by a discussion about what agents can do or what can be done to help agents from an agent experience standpoint be able to manage people who are vulnerable in such a way that's going to be empathetic, that's going to be compassionate, but at the same time making sure that the agents themselves and their level of agent well-being is not going to be put at risk. Because, as I said to Marianne and to Cath, you can deal with one person who's got a sensitive situation, and that will take a lot of energy out of you, both physically and emotionally. But imagine dealing with several people like that over the course of the day. Very, very traumatic. So I think for me, it's an angle of CX that I've not explored in my career. And it's one that I'm very glad that we're getting onto the pod to bring awareness about this problem.
Yeah, I've certainly explored some of these angles with regards data analytics and using insight into consumer behavior to try actually exploring or predicting customers that might be vulnerable. So that's certainly an interesting angle that I've seen some companies exploring.
There's some really horrific numbers that came out during the course of our discussion. Cath was referencing the extent to which loan sharking has increased from 300,000 people in the UK using this form of financing based on a study that was done in 2010 to over 1 million in the last little while. It goes to show the extent to which people are being stretched financially. It goes to show the extent to which people are having to find unsuitable means of financing perhaps a situation that they're trying to get out of. And the extent to which the contact center industry can work, whether it's in debt collection or whether it's help in terms of credit management, everyone's got a role and a responsibility. And I think that as we went through the discussion, I at least saw some light at the end of the tunnel when I saw that there are options that the CX community can use in terms of informing themselves about what can be done to manage people who are in a vulnerable state, what they can do in terms of informing themselves to make sure that they're compliant within regulation. But at the end of the day, it's a problem that's not going to go away anytime soon. And I think empathy, compassion, and compliance are going to be the watchwords as we move forward.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult situation. We see jobs getting more precarious. We've seen energy prices shooting through the roof in the UK, inflation going up into double digits. And these are just situations just the country hasn't experienced for decades. So it's very complex.
Why don't we have a listen to what Marianne and Cath had to say? I said when we were starting the intro, it's probably one of the more emotionally charged ones that we have done. So I would just recognize and just mention this to listeners that this is not necessarily going to be the most upbeat of our discussions, but certainly one that I think we've all got to listen to and get a dose of reality from. The CX Files takes an interesting turn this week. Now, as many of our listeners know, we focus habitually on what's going on in the customer management space. We talk a lot about different trends as it relates to offshoring, to technology, to different functions and different industries. But I'm really happy today to be joined by two individuals in the United Kingdom that are bringing, quite frankly, a very serious point of attention to the pod, and we're really looking forward to our chat today. We're going to be joined by Marianne Withers, who is the leader of the Verity Center, which is based in Havant, just outside Portsmouth. Marianne, great to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Peter.
It's been a little while. I think the last time we caught up was in London at lunch with Enterprise Georgia, was it not?
Yes, it was. That was absolutely fantastic, meeting everyone, and the food was amazing.
Yeah, my waistline's never been the same.
There was a lot.
It was, but delicious, every morsel. We're also delighted to be joined by Cath Wohlers, who is with the England Illegal Money Lender team. Cath, thank you very much for joining us from your home in Lancashire.
Lovely to be here, and now very hungry as well.
Well, we'll have to make sure that we get you down to the next lunch with the Georgians. Trust me, I actually was in Tbilisi a few weeks ago with some prospective BPO investors, and shall we say that nobody went home hungry.
Sounds good.
So to talk about a serious issue that's going on in the UK right now, and I suspect in many other countries as well, it's the issue of vulnerability and the issue of vulnerable customers, and something that I've seen a lot of coverage around both here in Canada. I follow the news cycle in the UK quite regularly as well. And this is something that has really come up as a topic. But to frame our discussion today, Marianne, I'm going to throw the baton to yourself. If you could talk a little bit about how the issue of vulnerability came onto your radar. You brought it up with me, and I thought this would be an amazing topic for a podcast. But if you can give us some context here about some of your thoughts on this and really why this should be at the forefront of the CX discussion right now, that would be great.
Cool. To be honest, it all goes back a very long time with me. I actually worked for the housing department for 5 years, and I work with an awful lot of vulnerable people coming into the centre. And I think it's just my pure beliefs that I've always looked at being able to help and support people wherever I've been. And moving into the contact centre industries over the years, anyone who knows me will tell you that my focus has always been on people development, and making sure that everyone's in a position that they are fully educated and developed and nurtured and trained to be able to communicate to people in the right way. And, you know, over the years, again, seeing all the different types of campaigns, and actually working on a lot of kind of debt collection over the time and seeing how people have done it, I've become more and more interested. And, having the Verity Centre myself now, it means that I could really focus and develop our people, and do a lot of work in that area. And, one of the guys I've been talking to, Chris Jones, where they've got a portal and it's to do with all training for people. We tested, and we've gone through all of the training with them for our people to be trained in how to signpost things in the right way. And that started actually coming up with an awful lot of questions. And there was some things I saw in the industry that really started to scare me. One was the amount of kind of outbound that was happening in kind of the kind of gaming industry, and that is looking at talking to people and actually getting them to place bets, which, considering the economic crisis, the credit crunch and everything, that, contacting people who I would say would be in a vulnerable state because, they might have registered to bet. However, they haven't in a while. There's two things that is probably the reason why. One, they can't afford to. And secondly, there's a good chance that they might actually have a problem with gambling. So those are the areas that I started looking at. And then in more depth, we all know what happened with British, a large energy organization on the news who was going into people's premises and they were changing over the meters and that type of thing. And then I started and understood that there were some large energy companies out there who were outsourcing offshore to get really cheap prices, that it was then being back insourced into the UK on a risk-only based, which meant that people and agents on the phone were being kind of pressurized to actually collect debt on when the factors, again, we got the credit crunch and crisis going on, because the only way that that company would get paid is if they collected the debt. And so bringing it all together, I started kind of thinking, what can we do in the industry to start looking at educating people, understanding it and training, and really looking at not then just the vulnerability of the people we're talking to, but the vulnerability of our people on the phone. Because if we're actually talking to people and we're trying to collect debt, those people we're trying to collect debt from, when I started to talk to Trish Cassidy and the fact of, looking at loan sharks, so some of these people might be actually borrowing money to actually pay for their energy. Then we're going to chase them and try and get them to pay the debt, which then they have to borrow more. And, something where they borrow £100 might become 500, may become 1,000, because it just evolves and evolves and it evolves. So, I saw one of my team having to deal with someone on the phone, said they were going to commit suicide. And, you then got to make sure that your person is absolutely looked after. They're able to say the right things, but it's not just that, it's afterwards, taking them off the phone, how they're treated, making sure that they feel very comfortable and that they've done a great job. So with all this in my mind is, this is how I focus and what I do internally here. But I think that it's such a massive thing for the whole contact center industry, especially at the moment. There is so much utility work going on of collecting debt. How are they doing it? How are they pushing the people at home to try and repay their debt? And I think it's something massive that the CX industry has to look at and put it at the forefront of what they're doing in companies.
Thanks, Marianne. That's very sobering what you've just explained over the course of the past couple of minutes. Cath, I want to throw it over to you now. Can you give us a little bit of context about what vulnerability looks like in the UK right now based on the role that you're in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that we see obviously is people who are very financially vulnerable. And I think that is a key vulnerability at the moment. And that can be because of a number of reasons. It can be because of a lack of access to credit. It can be because of debt. It can be because of poor financial education. And it can be because they are vulnerable in some other way, which leads them open to exploitation, whether that's financial abuse, illegal lending, or something else. So I think one of the things that we see is a kind of intersectionality of vulnerability. A lot of the people that we work with who have gone to illegal lenders, they've had multiple things happen to them. It's not been one cause. It's not been one thing that's pushed them into this path. It's been a number of things. It's been a relationship breakdown, or a job change, or an hours change at work, or a new child, or something else happening, which has meant that their actual financial situation has just sort of chipped away at getting worse and worse and worse. And I think there's so many factors that play into vulnerability, which is why it's so difficult to tackle, because it's not like you can just fix one thing. It's not like if you gave everybody access to credit, all of a sudden financial vulnerability would be solved, because it wouldn't. It's about so many different multifacets that it's a really tricky one to try and address.
Yeah, very, very multifaceted, very tricky, as you say. I don't think there's one single formula in terms of identifying somebody who could be vulnerable. Everybody's got their own circumstances. And Marianne, you raised something that I thought was very, very concerning from an ethical standpoint. The fact that you would get organizations doing outbound calling, asking people to place bets. My suspicion would be, as you say, many people would probably already have issues with gambling. And this just prevaricates it. You know, it's like going up to somebody who's a recovering alcoholic and putting a beer under them. It's completely unfair.
Yeah.
And this raises a question then, and I'll ask both of you, maybe starting with yourself, Marianne, from an ethical standpoint or from a moral standpoint, and I hesitate to use that word, but you'll know where I'm going with this. What responsibilities do captive and outsourced contact centers have in terms of dealing with vulnerable people?
I think the whole thing is really difficult on that one, because you know, bringing it back to the gambling thing, you know, my moral ethics are, I said an absolute no, that I was not interested. So, you know, one, I'm not going to put my staff through it. And, you know, considering the fact that you know, it's a tough for contact centers out there at the moment, because there's so many, and that you need business. But on an ethical ground, it's not a work that I would put in front of my agents to do. You know, I don't believe in gambling myself. I mean, you know, if other people want to do it, then that is their business. But, you know, the one thing I'm not going to do is promote that. And actually, one of the things that really got me was initially that they wanted to look at it on a paid hourly basis, but then they wanted it to move after a couple of months into a risk reward. So basically, you know, you're not going to get so much money unless you really push it and hit your service levels of achieving the successes and outcomes that the client wants you, which means that it is going to be driven in some contact centers pretty hard. Otherwise, it's not going to be financially viable. So you cross that over into the vulnerability that you are then going to be asking your staff to really push hard on sales to be able to get the right targets achieved. So it's you know, it's down to companies. I mean, from my moral side of it, I wouldn't even do it. And I wouldn't even put that in front of any person who worked for me. You know, on the other side of it, you know, when you talk about debt collection, I have done debt collection, but what I've done is transformed it into credit encouragement and be able to talk, you know, in the right way of how about putting certain plans in place to be able to support them, that they're comfortable and that they can actually achieve the amounts that they need to pay on a monthly basis. You know, there's no point beating people over the head to be able to get something, because all it's going to do is put them into more difficulty. When I worked in housing, I went out on evictions because it was part of my development and training. And, you know, the vulnerabilities that I saw out there were really, really, you know, shocking. And I agree so much with Cath that every instance is so very, very different. I mean, one house we went to, the husband knocked the door, and let's say we had to sit him down because he was in completely and utter shock because his wife had not paid the rent for the last year. He had given them the money every week to pay for it, and what she had done was gamble.
Oh,
so
terrible.
Yeah, the mixture of these things. So you really don't know. You're ringing someone's home, you're putting yourself into their space. And, you know, if you're talking about gambling, you have absolutely no idea for them. You don't know whether they've got a loan shark at the moment or not. You don't know whether or not that the fact is that they have a gambling issue. And, you know, what questions are you going to ask to be able to find that? Because then that's very intrusive. You're going to have people doing sales who are going to be pushing the fact that they want you to make a decision and they want you to gamble more. So again, you know, I think there's a lot of individuals themselves in contact centres, if they were asked to do that, they probably would say, no, I don't want to. But does that put them in an awkward situation within their company as well?
This is it.
There's so many questions.
There's a lot. And a question I've got for you, Cath, then is from a regulatory or statutory standpoint, can you talk to us a little bit about perhaps some of the responsibilities that contact centers or leaders in the CX industry have in terms of addressing vulnerable individuals and making sure that they're not taken advantage of, or as Marianne said, that they're treated in a humane fashion when somebody might be going to try and collect debt?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't there? There's regulatory what you have to do, and then there's morally what you should do as well. And so they should be the same thing, but they're not always the same thing, as we know. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're very conscious of is that, you know, our interactions with people who have had dealings with debt collection agencies is two-way. It's either that they had a loan shark and that's why they were in debt, and that's how this legitimate debt, whatever it was, ended up being so high, because they will prioritize the loan shark debt. Even though that debt is unenforceable, even though the loan shark would not win that debt at court, people prioritize the loan shark debt because it's someone who's knocking at their door. As Marianne said, it's someone in their home, it's someone in their face, in their space. And loan sharks are very good at you gaining control of people. They will spot the vulnerability, they will find the vulnerability, and then they will play on it. So I think there's the fact that, you know, the reason someone may have got a debt that's got to the point of debt collection might be because of an illegal lender. But also there is a danger that if that isn't the case, having a debt collector contact them might push them to an illegal lender. You know, one of the problems we have is that 50% of loan shark victims believe they're borrowing money from a friend. So if you think that, you know, that might be something someone might say, you know, is there someone you could borrow the money from? Could you borrow from a friend maybe? And actually, some of those people may turn out not to be friendly. You know, it might be Bob down the pub, or Susan at the school gates, or, you know, Julia, who I work with, and they think they're their friend, but actually they are an illegal lender who lend money to lots and lots of people and then absolutely exploit them and bleed them dry. So I think that there's always that kind of thing for me. It's twofold. It's what's pushed someone to the position where they have a debt that's gone to a debt collection agency, but also then what happens as a result of the debt collection agency making contact. There's a big push from the UK government at the moment for something called consumer duty, which is being put on things like debt advisors, but also on credit businesses. And I think that's about treating the customer holistically. It's looking at them as an individual and as a person. And I think, you know, one of the things that we're doing very much with things like even bailiff firms, enforcers, but also debt advice agencies, credit unions, and everybody else, is we offer free training. And that training, the idea is we will come in and we will tell you what a loan shark victim looks like and how they may present to your organisation, and then what to do with that information and how to get them safely across to us. And I think that's one thing to me that really morally should be done. You know, if that's the reason someone's got a debt that's gone bad, then whatever arrangement you make with them will fail, because they will continue to pay the loan shark. Pretty much guarantee it, because this is someone who maybe is threatening their kids, or threatening to tell their boss that they owe money, or threatening to shame them on social media, or threatening worse. And at the end of the day, that in their face person with 150 text messages a day who doesn't care what happens in the rest of this individual's life, that will take precedent over anybody else. So I think there's a real kind of push there for the industry to get in touch and access our training and be able to say they're doing everything they can to support any loan shark victims that may come across their paths.
So I've got two follow-up questions for you here, Cath. First of all, this loan shark thing I find terrifying. I mean, we've seen this on television, we've seen it in TV shows like The Sopranos, and it's taken a bit of a dramatic turn, I think, in some cases. But there's nothing dramatic about it. There's nothing funny about this. This is very serious. Can you talk a little bit about the extent to which loan sharking has increased over the course of the past few years, based on your observations? If you can quantify, great, but even anecdotally would be fantastic. And then I've got another question for you.
Okay, cool. So the quantifying one is nice and straightforward. So there was a piece of research in 2010 that said 300,000 UK households using loan sharks. There was a piece of research in 2022 that said 1.08 million people in England alone using households, which is actually 2% of the population. And that was before the cost of living crisis. That's a year ago now. There is another piece of research being done at the moment, which is going to be launched in June. And we may well see that number go up even higher. So I think that's one thing. But I think in terms of kind of loan shark techniques are changing as well. So I've been doing this job 15 years. And when I started, it was very much cash business. You took the loan shark's money to him or her. You took it to their house, to their boxing gym, to the pub, and you gave it to them. And they chased door to door people who didn't pay them. And I think what we've seen now is a switch to banking, to open banking transactions, to faster payments via mobile phones, and also loan sharks, therefore, on social media. So their reach has got bigger. So whereas before, if it was Brian down the pub, I'm picking on the name Brian today, I don't know why. If it was Brian down the pub, then you could literally draw a ring around the pub where the regulars were, and that would be Brian's patch. That would be where his victims lived. Whereas now you can be a loan shark in Doncaster in the UK, lending money, 200, 300 miles away, because it's all done on social media and it's all done on faster transfer. But I think as well, the problem is that's where the shaming is done. That's where the threats are. The threats are on social media, and people just end up so isolated. And that's part of the problem that we're seeing. So I think it's increasing in numbers as the evidence we have, but also the nature of it is changing. And you're absolutely right with the Sopranos link as well. I always say over here, it's Phil Mitchell from EastEnders. That's what people sort of picture, for a loan shark. Whereas 1 in 5 of the people we arrested last year was female. And we've had loan sharks in their 70s, because the actual offence they commit, lending money without authorization, anyone can do. And the way they gain control over people's lives is a lot subtler than I'm going to break your legs a lot of the time. So again, anyone can do it. And that again throws people into sort of disarray, because they're not expecting this person they believed was their friend, who's 75 years old and female, to actually be an illegal lender, but they could well be.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. Now, my next question is, you've talked a little bit about the free training that your organization is offering. What's the take-up been like on that from creditors or from different organizations running contact centers? Has there been some enthusiasm for what you're offering?
There definitely has been. It's been increasing over the last 6 to 9 months, I would say. So historically, we've always trained public sector employees, so housing officers, police officers, debt advisors, charity workers. We have seen a shift in the last, even maybe 12 months, to creditors, to credit reference agencies, to enforcers as well, and to contact centres. And we're really pleased with that, because it's one of those things that people don't admit. They won't admit they're a loan shark victim to themselves, maybe. They won't even say it to a police officer or a debt advisor. And I think it's just being able to ask the right question at the right time. We've had a couple of things that have come through from contact centres in England, and it's been a case of someone just knowing something wasn't quite right on the phone. Doing income and expenditure, looking at it and thinking this isn't adding up, and there's something in this person's tone that isn't just someone who doesn't want to pay. There's more to this, and just unpicking it a little bit, and then having the resource to sort of make a phone call to us, and we've worked with them to support that person. In one case, the person chose to engage, in another one they didn't. That's absolutely fine. But at least those individuals now know we exist, and they may well come back to us in the future.
Can I ask a question there, Cath? You say contact centre industries have, and done some of it. What about outsourced BPOs?
Ooh, I'd have to check. Not off the top of my head, but I'd have to check.
That'll be for our follow-up contest.
No, this is where it kind of concerns me, because if it's a contact centre within, let's say, a utility company, then the fact is that they are employed by the utility company. So the fact is that there isn't the kind of direct pushing of what can happen out in the BPO, because if they outsource and they put you on risk only, it means that you only get paid if you collect the debt. And that is where the danger is. If you're part of a contact center within a utility, then, you know, money comes from what the utility companies do. So that part I would be very interested in, you know, because also we offshore a load of debt. You know, and in this country, we have the rules of the FCA surrounding everything, but offshore, there isn't the rules or regulations to adapt. So in the contact center environment, I think we're talking about the BPO is a different space, even more. And that is the area that I would kind of look at. It could concern me, because what's in place to ensure those people are doing the right thing.
It's a very reasonable point. Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Peter.
No, I actually think Marianne brings up a very, very interesting point there about third parties, and then adding that other element of offshoring into it, that brings a whole new level of complexity to this discussion.
Absolutely, it does. And, you know, we definitely haven't done any offshore people, I can tell you that much for nothing. So I think it's a really tricky one, isn't it? And it's almost awful, but sometimes we have to go in with the other carrot, which is, you know, your repayment plan will fail if there is a loan shark there, rather than you're doing the right thing by this individual or whatever else. We have to almost switch it on its head from, you know, whatever the expression is, carrot to donkey, and make it that, you know, it's about, you know, if you want to get that money, if you want to get your money back, you have to make sure that that this person hasn't got this person knocking at their door at 3 o'clock in the morning and terrifying their children. But, you know, we're a public sector body, and we will train literally anybody. But I think it's an emerging conversation for us as well. Like I say, historically, it's very much been public sector bodies that we've trained. So we are very keen to be involved with whoever we can to further our reach as much as possible.
Okay, so my last question, ladies, and what has been an absolutely fascinating discussion, one of the most interesting ones I had since I've started co-hosting this pod. Marianne, it's for you. You raised a point a little while ago that I want to dive into it a little bit more, and that relates to agent experience and the management of agents who are dealing with vulnerable people. We're hearing more and more about health and safety and wellness of the agent community, the individuals that are on the front lines. What advice do you have for organizations that might have agents that are dealing with individuals that are facing mountains of debt or facing elements around vulnerabilities, perhaps as we're talking about gambling addictions, or perhaps elements that would make them incapable of making full payments or even partial payments? How do you manage the staff that are facing very sensitive situations and very, very sad stories on not once a day basis, perhaps several times a day basis?
One of the things I would say is, from what I've seen over a number of years, I think contact centers need to go back to some real basic things. There's something I've worked on for a long time, which is situational management, and the fact of, you know, a person isn't a team, you know, a person is an individual within a team, but an individual is also made up of all different elements. Some of the things they may be great at, maybe the other things that they need help and development on. The issue that I see is with team managers and operations managers, that we need to focus and give them the right training and education. And actually, let's move away from the word training. You train animals, you train military, we educate people. And that's what we should be looking at doing, of how to deal with things. And how about team managers actually becoming focused? And there are some amazing ones out there, but there's an awful lot of mediocre ones. That is it their fault? No, it's the development and the nurturing that they're getting above. How about understanding your people? When I was a team manager and I had a team of 12 people, I knew them all. Absolutely. And I knew their vulnerabilities. I knew what buttons to press with them to be able to inspire them and nurture them. So one of the elements I think we need to look at, if you're looking at people's mental well-being, is really understand your people and care about your people. and being looking at them as an individual to understand what they're made up of, to understand what their vulnerabilities may be, because then it's quite easy to put a plan together to make sure that they're okay. You know, I did stop, it used to be that, you know, the team manager be in, and when people used to come in, they used to greet them and say hello to them. And, you know, in the morning, you could tell very quickly someone's temperament from that just little conversation of how they are. And to be honest, and I've seen it in a huge amount of places, team managers not even around when their guys walk in. And it's this whole thing about focusing on what you really care for. Understand your people, understand their vulnerabilities, and it means you can develop them and you can actually educate them on what they to do with someone else. It's about making them feel comfortable in their arena. And I think that is the point of, you know, we're only tiny, but I did it when I had 1,000 seats and 1,500 seats, is making sure my senior level people and my operational management people and the team managers all were educated in the right way of understanding about how to manage people. You know, do you give them direction? Do you give them support? Do you give them guidance, or do you delegate? Well, actually, with someone, you might do all of that, but it's understanding their kind of quirkiness and their attributes to understand, on this element, I can delegate completely, absolutely brilliant. But this element, they need some guidance on. And this element, they need direction, and they need an arm around them to be able to give them the support they need. So I think it's transformation within contact centres to change and not actually go, yes, we do it, and yes, we pay a lot of attention, because actually you talk to a lot of team managers and they work very hard and they do a lot of stuff, but actually really ask them about their people and how many all really understand their individuals within the team, to understand what their needs are and how they can help them and how they can make them great.
I think that is a great point to finish off on. Thank you very much, Marianne. Cath, thank you very much. I truly appreciate you both spending some time and talking about what's obviously a very serious issue, one that deserves, I think, quite frankly, more attention than it gets in our industry and the discussion around our industry. But this is a great first step. So we look forward to having you back on soon. And I wish you both well for the rest of the day and for the rest of 2023.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.